And so what I intend to do over the next 20 minutes or so is basically give the International Energy Agency's perspective on the causes of this crisis. What was our reaction immediately after the invasion of Ukraine started, what our suggestion and work with the European Commission has been, and then I'll give you our view on what's happening globally and what could change for the global clean energy sector and the energy sector at all. So I'll start with the first part. We have discussion, of course, with a lot of our member countries that are basically more or less the same as the European Union one, plus the US, Japan, Australia, and the constituencies of the IEA is larger. And sometimes we do feel that there is, in some quarters, a bit of misunderstanding of the root causes of this crisis. In some quarters, there is insinuations that maybe the clean energy transition has actually helped and was a cause of what we're seeing in global markets today. And I want to show you this graph that for us really tells the real story of what's happening. So first of all, we are living a gas crisis, and this gas crisis that is bringing up European gas and electricity prices and global electricity prices is due to some behavior of Russia pre-war and the invasion of Ukraine. Here what you see is actually a price indication of the TTF prices we have here for the LNG in Europe. And you see that has been pretty much stable. It was a bit increasing in 2021, as one would expect, because we were coming out of the COVID crisis with strong rebound in demand and was bringing up a bit prices in the range of prices that we have seen before. Then suddenly, what happened in September 2021, we started seeing in our data that gas pump flows to Europe in September 2021, well before there were talks of any war, invasion, or anything. Gas pump flows to Europe were around 1/3 lower than over the past 5, 6, 7 years. This led, of course, to, on the wake of still growing demand because the economy were boosted, led an increase in prices, but that was due from an artificial tightness created by some withdrawal of normally fluxes that would have seen into Europe. This actually led our executive director in December 2021 in an interview with the Financial Times saying, for us it's unusual that these lower flows coincides with the fact that we are also seeing at the same time Russian troops moving on the border. So this brings us then in March, where you see a big price spike, of course, immediately after the invasion that happened end of February. And I jump to today, and today for us is basically we are living in a new world of structural uncertainty on gas prices, where Russia has proven and is proving a very unreliable supplier to Europe. Therefore, Europe needs to act very quickly to secure the lights and the heating for the consumers. So the urgency of that for us was very clear immediately at the beginning of March. And that's why really it was, I think, the 10th of March where we came up and suggesting European Union member countries, the EU, to act immediately on a number of actions. We called it a 10-point plan. And now, several months later, I'd like to say that many things have been done in the right direction. So generally speaking, we would see actions in 3 areas. The first, diversifying supplies as much as possible. And I think we're doing very well here. The second is filling up the storage. And our assessment was 90% by beginning of the winter this year to be safe on a safe side. And we're doing very well on that side as well, especially in Northern Europe. And the third set of measures on demand. And I'll come back to this. And here we think we could have acted earlier. There is still time, especially on the structural measure that we need to push. Now, if you look at what has happened on the supply side of the story, overall, if you want to get out of Russia gas, which is, as Sirpa mentioned earlier on, the overall, if you want, spirit and vision of the Repower EU, our analysis shows that you would be able to do it, basically half of it with supplies from other sources, non-Russian sources, and the other half you need to do it on demand sources. And demand sources there, of course, you need to tackle power, you need to tackle the building sector, you need to tackle the industrial sector. So if you focus on 1 second on this first part, on the supply, these are data from that I'm showing here, data from January to August. And you look from the right-hand side, you really see the United States has stepped up. We have seen an increase of nearly overall 70% of influx of LNG into Europe. It is extraordinary. We have seen growth in other regions. Also, non-LNG supplies volumes have increased through pipes from friendly and secure countries. This is still, we're expecting more volumes to come from other sources, from North Africa, from the Caspian, from part of West Africa, from the Middle East. I would like to just show you something which I think is important for next winter, not this winter. We were basically helped, if I may say so, also by the fact that China did not grow very much this year. The economic growth of China was quite mild, to say the least. This has led to quite low electricity use and therefore gas use. So China found themselves with more gas contracted than it could use. So it was basically rerouted towards the European Union. It was a good news for us, even if, of course, we are paying these LNG very high prices. But in terms of volumes, we were able to secure those volumes. So for me, what is striking and important to see here, this year, we got as much help from increased LNG supplies from the United States as we were from lower demand from China. Whether this is happening next year as well, it's a big question mark, because expectations on growth for China next year vary, but they are certainly more robust than what we have seen this year. So we need to work towards securing further LNG routes. But we come to the other part, on the demand. On the demand, we had said that there are behavior measures. Immediately we suggested lower the thermostats. The amount of BCM we can save are over 10 BCM. This is one of the pipes of the famous Nord Stream, is exactly bringing that amount. If all of us were just to reduce, not even a 19 BCM, but 19 degrees, but 1 degree compared to what we normally reduce, all Europeans 1 degree lower is 10 BCM. But I want to focus here on the clean energy and the clean energy transition itself. What we are not hearing much in the news today is that actually governments have put on the table an amount of structural recovery spending. Here I'm not talking affordability. I'm not talking about the necessary measures that are needed to support consumers to pay their bills at the end of the month. Here I'm talking about structural recovery measures, structural clean energy measures that are towards electricity grids, that are towards hydrogen, that are towards heat pumps, that are towards electric vehicles. Globally, we are now at the end of August 2022, 1.1 trillion euros. How much is that? To give you a sense of scale, this is twice as much what globally we had spent immediately after the financial crisis. For us, this is unprecedented. And the numbers show that this is unprecedented. And it's not finished. We are expecting and seeing countries putting in place more. Now, this government mobilization of money is critical, as for us is the key way to accelerate investment. And in inflationary periods, this is crucial, not only for the energy sector, but for the economy as a whole. And what is extraordinary is that, of course, Europe has always been leading on clean energy. But if you look at this amount of money, 1/3 is European money, another third is US money, and the other third is basically other advanced economies. This we had not seen before. In August, the US passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And this for us is really going to catalyze an incredible amount of new investment in clean energy technologies in the US as well. Will it help us? Yes, because this will actually free up quickly, more quickly than we anticipated before, more gas that could be exported from the US to Europe. Not only, it will also help continue reducing the cost of clean energy technologies. So really, this is the beginning of the decade of acceleration globally and with Europe clearly at the center. What is our expectation? Our expectation is that if we follow the national energy and climate plans, we're going to see some difficult years ahead. We need to be more ambitious. We need to clearly implement the Green Deal and hopefully go beyond as much as possible with REPowerEU. What you see here, if you focus on oil, clearly, we would feel ourselves much less pressure because the demand would continue to decline at a faster pace. But what I would like to focus is really gas. The amount of reduction we do see really implementing the Green Deal would be very close to the amount of reduction we would need in terms of demand to fill the overall 150 BCM of Russian gas we would be not using. Demand measure complemented with the increase of other supplies. As you can see there, the expectation of the speed up of the Green Deal in terms of wind and solar would be spectacular. But I would like to draw the attention here on two things. We are seeing now utilities, investment and liquidity is not the issue. Permitting is the issue. Grids are the issue. So really, member countries should really work very closely and very quickly to allow permitting and fast tracking of the renewables throughout Europe to make sure that the numbers of the Green Deal don't remain numbers, but become real projects and the investments are really materialized. Now, what we are seeing is that a mismatch between the demand for new installation of solar and wind and actually how quickly the permitting arrives. And on the other hand, which is equally something that should be put on the table as quickly as possible, grids, which are going to be essential if we want the electricity generated by this wind and solar to be brought to our customers. We need to build the grids. If we look at the grids extension planned over the next several years, and those are projects that, unlike renewables, take 5, 7, 10 years to be put in place, they're lagging behind. So for us, is really the wake-up call here on the renewable side is permitting, grids. And the wind and solar are critical to clearly reduce the demand of gas that you see there. At the same time, the other part that we see critical is buildings, pushing very strongly on energy efficiency. We are doing far too slowly, 1% a year renovation. We should go to 3%. There are not many bottlenecks there. We really need to work with the local governments to make sure that this is pushed. Where we are not seeing much action, and we are going to work over the next couple of months to really put the focus, a laser focus on this, is heat pumps. Heat pumps for us are critical, making sure that the heating system shifts towards a much more sustainable model that doesn't need natural gas is essential. Heat pumps are a key part of the solution. Of course, biogases as well and low carbon gases as well. But heat pumps we are really seeing not accelerating fast enough. They had a very good year last year. It's very concentrated in a few number of countries. We're not seeing this. We are working together with the Commission, a lot of countries, on a report with very clear recommendations what we should be doing to help customers to scale up on that. Now I want to show you this number. It is an indication in a way of a broader story. This is an anticipation of our forthcoming World Energy Outlook, which we'll release in a month time, but I'll give you this as it is critically. This shows you the amount of electric vehicles sales shares in the global market. Our estimate is that for 2022, we will be reaching around 13% globally. And the expectation is that by 2030, more than a car in 3 globally is going to be electric. But important part of the story here is that when we look at Europe, when we look at the US, when we look at China, and those 3 markets are together over 2/3 of the global car market in the world. 1 in 2 cars in each of these markets separately is expected to be electric. Now, this is what we consider a cusp of really the transition for the electric vehicle, but is an indication that not only for EVs, but for a number of clean energy technologies, we are really seeing this needed acceleration. I go to another technology that we're seeing clearly not for today or for tomorrow, but that will help us in the decade to 2030, and is hydrogen. There is an incredible number of countries now that has put forward hydrogen strategies. It's very rare to hear countries that don't like hydrogen, and when we work with countries, there are many sympathies, but also antipathies vis-a-vis certain technologies, fuels. For hydrogen, of course, there are differences between colors of hydrogen, so someone prefers one color over another, but overall, it's really a technology that many countries are embracing, and a number of companies. So the proliferation of projects we have been seeing over the past 3 years is spectacular. We had not seen this before with another fuel. We need to go back around 20 years ago for solar to see something similar. This we just released the Clean Energy Ministerial last week. And if you just look at the electrolyzer part, so the green hydrogen, with adding up projects that are FID approved, in construction and FID and feasibility, stack them up, we are nearly at 70% of what we would need to be fully online globally with what was promised in Glasgow. Europe has a big part in this story, but I want to take the opportunity here to give 2 thoughts and risks that also need to be taken into account while we're pushing towards this clean energy transition. This for hydrogen is going to be, as it has been the case for solar, as it will be the case for EVs, a marathon, not just a very short run. And now we are being, in terms of European, at the forefront of this beginning of this marathon. But we were on the lead also in the past with solar, for example. But what matters is really who arrives first at the end of this marathon. So we would like to encourage European policymakers, companies, to work in a concerted manner to make sure that the big boost at the beginning is maintained throughout time in a coherent manner, so that the technological advances that we have achieved are not lost vis-a-vis other countries. And there is really an opportunity for Europe also to export and create domestic jobs. This is one part. So the steadiness of the work over and of the policy signals over a number of years. The other, which is linked to electrolyzers, but is linked much more broadly to the green energy transition, is critical minerals and the concentration of those critical minerals. Critical minerals are needed for everything in the clean energy transition, from batteries through the cables in the grids, through what we need for the parts of the offshore wind turbines. So really, they are ubiquitous in the utilization. However, the production currently is very concentrated. It's very concentrated for certain minerals in China, for other minerals in DRC in Africa. And our warning as International Energy Agency is careful not going from one dependency, so gas to Russia, to other type of dependency. So work as quickly as possible to diversify the suppliers and create robust mechanisms to ensure that those supplies are there. So for us, this is really the energy security challenge of the clean energy transition, and we are putting it very much and strongly at the core of the mandate with all of our member countries, including the European ones. I will conclude with showing you something on employment. We are tracking now for the past couple of years jobs by all regions in the world and by all sectors of course energy. And what we have found is that, of course, there was a very deep contraction of energy jobs during the pandemic in 2020. But this year, we are already seeing that global clean energy jobs, and in Europe as well, have gone back up above the level of pre-COVID. What is important to note is that while jobs in fossil fuels are still below 2019 levels, all the growth has actually happened in the clean energy sector. This means that basically today in 2021, 2022, all regions of the world, but Russia and the Middle East, have more people employed in the clean energy sector than in the conventional one. This is true for Europe as well, and Europe has another mark that is important. It has the largest number of employees in clean energy technologies among advanced economies. Of course, we cannot compete with China. China has probably a workforce in renewables that is larger than all the advanced economies put together. China has very clearly made, even if not making a big fuss out of it, clean energy technologies, EVs and batteries in particular, being a critical part of their economic growth. Solar is 7% of the net exports of net current accounts of China, an incredible number. But clearly, the opportunities created by the Green Deal in terms of expanding this workforce for Europe are incredible. And I will conclude, even if I don't have a slide here. Our analysis shows very clearly that the other important component of what implementing the Green Deal would mean is really creating much more affordability and much more affordable and stable bills for customers, especially the ones that are in lower income classes. In conclusion, 2 words: the roots of the crisis are not in the clean energy transition, are very clearly to be seen in a behavior that Russia has had since September 2021. So is a constraint of the market that was done in a voluntary way. So it's a gas crisis, it's not a clean energy transition crisis. We are not only in Europe, but also in Europe, and thanks to Europe for this speed running at the cusp of the decade of a clean energy transition. There are a few pitfalls that we don't need to fall into. This winter is going to be long, but for us, spring is coming, and spring is coming with the implementation of Green Deal and matching this money with private money. Thank you. I don't know if Sirpa can hear me now.
I don't know if you can hear me. Please signal
Yes.
if you do. I don't know, somehow I lost the voice connection in the last minutes again. So I hope that the Roland can sort of share the questions and comments. But first of all, I would like to thank you for the excellent presentation. And especially I like three parts. My favorite is the grid ones, and I've been in favor for having this kind of a European super grid for a long time, and I think that this is an investment very long overdue that should have been started in the Europe ages ago to connect not only the Europe on electricity and renewables, but also, of course, the northern parts of the Africa. Second is the buildings and the deep renovations on energy efficiency, because as I gather, it is 40% of the energy consumption. And if we could make within the 5 years at least half of the buildings be energy positive, that would not only solve a huge part of the consumption, but increase a capacity on our electricity production. And the third one, and this is of course the highly debated hydrogen, just want to underline that it needs to be green, and that of course increases the challenges on this side. There's a lot of challenges, but this would be my list of the three priorities for the Europe. So I hope if you can comment on this, and I try to catch my voice back on hearing while Roland then is giving the comments for other people also.
Thank you, Sirpa. I fully agree that those are certainly priorities. I would say that priorities together with things that are happening as well. So the permitting of renewables, I think, is equally important. We are seeing really in some countries that there is the implementation on the ground is really only a fraction of what the utilities or the developers would like to do. So I certainly agree that with all you said. So grids, buildings, hydrogen, all a big push and all needed, and probably the areas where we are a bit lagging behind. If I may, I would like to rebound on something you mentioned only en passant on Africa. And I'd like maybe just to give a bit of a broader perspective. We are going into a month and a half at the COP in Africa, and something that we are witnessing is the following. The storyline of what's happening with this war and the cause of energy prices in emerging economies is much less clear than it is in Europe. It's being, in some cases, turned into a bit different stories. And for us, it's very important that a trust is reestablished as quickly as possible with emerging economies, and in particular between Europe and Africa. Now, there is this occasion of the next COP coming, and what we hear in the discussions with our African colleagues is not always it's not always positive. In particular, about natural gas development in Africa, and about if you want the double standards utilized between European energy policy and African energy policy. So I just would like to, for this audience, to give a couple of numbers of analysis that we did recently, and that the Egyptian presidency of COP, as well as the G20 an African Union presidency, which is Senegal this year, both rebounded on very strongly in a positive way. So Africa up to now accounted for around 3% of global greenhouse gas emission, and they have around, probably this number will not tell you much, but 5 TCM of natural gas ready with new proven reserves. Some of it is for export, some of it for domestic reasons, and for some of those they could not get the financial deals they wanted to have. And just so we did this exercise. If this 5 TCM were to be burned today, which of course is all the projects will never go ahead, but just a theoretical exercise, the 3% of Africa would go to 3.5%. So and Africa domestically needs this gas for desalination of water, for fertilizers. The food crisis we're seeing in parts of Africa is equally warning, it is not, if not more, than the energy crisis. And for cement, simply because they are still growing at an incredible amount, 70 million new people a year, so very significant growth in population. So maybe in addition to the domestic priorities that you very clearly indicated, I would add that certainly in the next month and a half, a renewed trust with the African continent, also for future developments of green projects, but also for extra routes of natural gas is going to really be super important.
I'm happy to be here again with the voice. So it was a technical issue, and I would like to now give the question to Roman and then to Guida, please.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Yes, hello, my name is Roland-Jan. I represent CLG Europe this morning. And first of all, we're very happy to see the emphasis on the clean energy transition as a solution to the energy crisis. So my questions are related to the discussions that member states are currently having on the solutions for the crisis. So there's discussions on capping energy prices from imports from Russia or all gas imports, also on using windfall taxes to increase government revenues for social to support the most vulnerable households. So really, you know, what are the pros and cons do you see in these solutions? And also given the fact that member states are choosing different approaches with some exemptions, notably to energy use, do you see any risk of the fragmentation of the energy market? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roman. This is you're raising very important question. So, as International Energy Agency, we are working also beyond Europe because in particular, the oil price cap is something that has been spearheaded by the US in particular. It's been in the work for several months now, and while clearly the reason behind having it are very clear and noble, it's very tricky. The implementation is really, the devil in this case is really in the details. So what I can report back is that there is still work in the making to have something that would create the solution and the outcome that one expects, which is lower revenues for Russia. So the design of this is really not obvious. So this is still ongoing. But I think the most important point that you're raising, Roman, is something that we have been highlighting as well, and is about solidarity. So we are being extremely clear about the fact that this winter, the next winter, possibly the following one, they're not going to be easy ones. But key to victory here is going to be solidarity among European countries. if we start seeing, there are two possible scenarios here. One is that the countries work in a cohesive manner on policies, on flows of energy, on coherence of policy approaches. And in this way, I think we can get out with a very strong Europe, with a very strong energy system. But there is a real risk that we end up with the Wild West scenario, where everyone goes its own way. And this would have bad implications, certainly for the energy sector, but beyond. So we are really warning in all possible occasions member countries to go and have solidarity as a very basic principle, as it is the case in the EU Foundation, to keep it over the next month. So for us, this really is a key issue. So thanks for raising it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Guido Bichisao from the European Investment Bank. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I was wondering whether it is fair to say from what you presented that while by 2030 Europe could become a net exporter, or in any case rather independent from an energy perspective, the next 3-5 years are going to be really complicated. Because when you say that permits and grids are the main constraints at the moment, well, grids are, but even given the permits, then transferring the permits in building renewable energies takes time. So building capacity would require 3-5 years at a minimum. The savings, you mentioned it, is at 10 BCM. We are lagging behind 100. So how are we going to face the next 3 to 5 years?
So thanks, Guido. So a few clarifications on what I said earlier. First of all, Europe in 2030 can be, even probably early, independent from Russian gas, but independent in terms of imports is not a scenario that we are anticipating for 2030 or for later on. So we will still continue to import gas from Norway, from other countries. So we are not necessarily getting out of imports or fossil fuels by 2030, but there is a viable route to get out of Russian gas in the next few years. So there are really two approaches to this. So given the need of extra supplies, I think here all countries are really doing a fabulous job to secure new sources of supply and diversify the amounts of gas that are missing from Russia. Then on the demand part, there is a structural measures that make it take time, but there are also contingency measures that can be done in a quick way. So we are seeing demand reduction that is due not only by behavior changes, meaning lowering the thermostat, for example, but due to simply price reaction. So we have listed a number of measures that can be taken in the next 3 to 5 years, while we really do the big push on the structural things that, as you very rightly point out, will take time to get at scale. Just as a sense of scale here, Europe has been installing in 2021 an amount of renewables that was second only to China in the world. So we are already doing very well. It's just a matter of doing it more and more quickly. And of course, this may incur in some difficulties. Our assessment shows that with the amount of storage that we have now in Europe, depending on how the winter goes, if we have an average winter, we could go through the winter with the solidarity that I think is a critically important important one, we could go through the winter in an okay way. If the winter is harsher, I hope the storage levels will continue to advance over the amount of October. So the critical part over the next few years, 3, 4, 5 years, that will be needed to scale up the structural clean energy transition will very much depend on storage levels and some behavior measures. If we manage to get to the storage level at 90% every winter, we can go through the winters in an okay way. They're not going to be easy winters. We are not expecting this, but as I said earlier, the longer term solution for us is very clear and is pushing clean energy very quickly.
Thank you very much.
Then our next question is on Erwin, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for this very interesting webinar. My name is Erwin Cornelis from ECOS, the Environmental Coalition and Standards. And well, I'm a bit triggered by your remark on heat pumps as the heating solution to go, which we of course we do support. But heat pumps are not the only sustainable source of heat. And I also refer to my question to the vast amounts of excess heat from the industry, and there are also other forms of sustainable heat, deep geothermal heat, that only can be tapped if you also have a district heating grid. And I noticed that in the Repower EU package or plan, there is no mention of recovery of waste heat, more in particular. And I was wondering whether this is a missed opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. Certainly, I think that we need to have a heating strategy. It's not about one solution over the other. We need to have a heating strategy that can be deployed very quickly. So there are certainly areas of Europe where district heating, CHP, waste heat, with geothermal or what you mentioned in industrial waste are the way to go. Other areas, it may not be that way. It may be using the current grid in areas where biogases can come quickly, feeding these with biogases. Other areas will need heat pumps. I think the common denominator among all this is what Sirpa mentioned earlier, which is an energy efficiency, a renovation strategy. But I fully agree with you that Europe needs to have very quickly a discussion about heating and bringing all the actors that can bring solutions quickly on the table together. Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next one who we have on line on here, I can't see at the moment any other questions. Roland, can you help me if there are some that I do not take a note of?
I think we've exhausted the questions that were asked, Sirpa.
So I would like to thank you, Laura, about the excellent presentation what you have made to us. It gives a lot of food for thought. It's really a wake-up call, and hopefully we can use the PowerPoints and pass your presentation on the social media also, if that is okay for you.